As French President Emmanuel Macron faces backlash on social media for alleged Islamophobia, more and more nations are coming out in Macron's support. India has joined the chorus amid European countries backing President Macron. The Indian External Affairs Ministry on Wednesday released a statement saying, I quote, "We strongly deplore the personal attacks in unacceptable language on President Macron, which is in violation of the most basic standard of international discourse." As the ongoing tussle goes on, France has appealed to European Union members to adopt measures against Turkey. Advocating sanctions, French Trade Minister said, and I quote, "France is united and Europe is united. At the next European Council, Europe will have to take decisions that will allow it to strengthen the power balance with Turkey to better defend its interests and European values," unquote. Remember, earlier this week, Turkish President Erdogan called for a boycott of French products. Tensions between France and Turkey are rising. French President Emmanuel Macron and Erdogan have been increasingly clashing over various issues. Over the past week, Erdogan said that Macron needs mental treatment over his attitude towards Muslims in France, prompting the French government to withdraw its ambassador from Ankara. The Turkish government condemned a series of cartoons published by French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, mocking Turkish President Erdogan. Speaking in the Turkish parliament on Wednesday, Erdogan said that countries attacking Islam want to relaunch the Crusades.
Adeta bunlar Haçlı Seferi yeniden başlatmak istiyorlar. Haçlı seferlerinden itibaren ne zaman ki Avrupa üzerinden gelen fitne ve kin tohumları bu topraklara düşmeye başlamıştır, işte o vakit huzur bozulmuştur.
The dispute can be narrowed down to the events of October 16th when a school teacher, Samuel Paty, was beheaded by an extremist Islamist for showing caricatures of the Prophet to his students. This was an attack on the freedom of expression for France. In Macron's eulogy at Paty's funeral, he said that France would never give up its liberties or its cartoons. France is currently at loggerheads with Islamic nations over cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. Any depiction of the Prophet is considered blasphemy among Muslims. Turkey, Pakistan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Iran have condemned the cartoons, while Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan accused Macron of peddling an anti-Islamic agenda. Joining us on this broadcast is Arun Singh, former ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Singh, thank you so much for giving us your time. Welcome to WION. India has firmly backed French President Emmanuel Macron. France is a thriving democracy, so is India. How do you see India's support for Macron? It was a really strongly worded letter denouncing the language that has been used against Macron by Erdogan.
There are many aspects and trends that are at play here. One, of course, the very strong relationship between India and France. In fact, way back in 1998, after India had done its nuclear tests, France was the only permanent member of the UN Security Council that had not criticized India and had opposed sanctions against India. And the first strategic partnership that India had formed at that time was with France. And that had been built upon decades of cooperation, particularly in the defense sector. Now, as you know, defense cooperation between India and France is very strong. Recently, we've inducted a new batch of Rafale aircraft from France, which are very capable, high-tech aircraft and very important for the Indian Air Force. Going beyond defense, France is also an important partner for India in nuclear energy and in space cooperation. At the UN Security Council, where France is a permanent member, it has continuously been supportive of India. It was supportive of India when China and Pakistan tried to move against India at the UN Security Council, when India had taken steps in August last year in the context of Jammu and Kashmir. It had also been helpful towards India when, following Balakot, India had taken some actions to protect its own security. So France has provided that support, and therefore it makes sense for India, seeing the present situation, seeing the completely sort of unacceptable personal attacks directed by the Turkish president against the French president to come out clearly outlining his position. Now, going beyond that, Turkey has not been helpful towards India, including in the context of Jammu and Kashmir. And the Turkish president has made several statements critical of India's actions, which India has taken in its own interest.
Right.
And therefore, it was important for India to point out where the Turkish president himself is making clear mistakes. Within Turkey, Erdogan has tried to build his politics on religion-based.
Absolutely.
There is increasing rivalry for leadership within the Muslim world, particularly between Turkey and Saudi Arabia. And again, Turkey is trying to inflame religion-based sentiments so as to consolidate its leadership position in the rivalry with Saudi Arabia. So that's another factor at play. Going beyond that, recently France and Turkey have had tensions between them on account of Turkish unilateral action in the Eastern Mediterranean, where it has sought to violate the Greek and Cyprus sovereignty and do unilateral gas explorations, and there's been some standoff between French and Turkish naval vessels. So there are many aspects that are in play in terms of relationship between France and Turkey, India and France, India and Turkey, and it makes full sense for India to come out in support of the French president.
Right. Ambassador, you say that France has been an all-weather ally of India, and it makes sense for India to back France all out like India has done. But, you know, I just want you to elaborate on this issue that you brought up with regards to Erdogan. Now, Erdogan has given a statement that Western countries mocking Islam wanted to relaunch the Crusades. Now, he's bringing up Crusades at a time when Emmanuel Macron is simply defending free speech in his country. He is acting against any sort of religious extremism. Muslims inside France have backed the stand taken by Emmanuel Macron. So why is Erdogan bringing up the Crusades? Does he simply want to whip up tensions? Does he want to influence the people? Is he only playing to the galleries, or is there more to it?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, he has used religion-based politics to consolidate his own power within Turkey. For a long time in Turkey, especially since Ataturk, politics had been based on secular principles. And for a long time, the Turkish army was an important force behind the political leaders. And the Turkish army defined its politics based on secular principles. Erdogan has changed all that. And gradually he has consolidated the power of his party. And going beyond that, he has consolidated his own personal power. And he has completely weakened the political hold of the Turkish military within Turkey. And he has done that by using religion and religion-based politics to consolidate his power. So for him, that's an important way in which he articulates his political positions. And going beyond that, as I mentioned, Turkey is making a major play for leadership within the Muslim world. They have got themselves involved in Syria, where they have physically intervened through the military to impact on the situation. They are trying to play a role also in Libya. And there are reports of Turkey taking Syria-based jihadi fighters from Syria to Libya to support the side that Turkey is supporting in Libya. It has supported Qatar in Qatar's rivalry with Saudi Arabia. There was a time when Turkey, along with Pakistan and Malaysia, had tried to convene a separate parallel meeting of Muslim countries outside the framework of the OIC.
Yes.
So Turkey is trying to make this play for leadership in the Muslim world, and therefore, for that reason, again, he wants to fan religion-based articulation and sentiment.
Right, and Imran Khan is backing Erdogan in this regard, isn't it? But, you know, while they are trying to unite the Muslim nations against the French president, Emmanuel Macron certainly does not stand alone. Like we've just told our viewers, India has firmly backed Emmanuel Macron. In fact, European leaders have come out and strongly criticized Erdogan. The Dutch Prime Minister says they stand firmly with France. for the freedom of speech and against extremism and radicalism. German Foreign Minister also said that this is a new low point for Erdogan and that Germany stands in solidarity with French friends. Italian Prime Minister, Greek President have all come out in support of Emmanuel Macron and his stance against religious extremism. In this face-off between camp led by Erdogan and Imran and Europe, who's going to be the likely loser as far as the economies are concerned and diplomacy is concerned?
You know, Europe and Turkey at one level need each other because there is an important and large Turkish diaspora present in Europe, particularly in Germany. They have an economic relationship. Turkey is also a member of NATO, and therefore the European countries, NATO countries, the United States, despite everything, attach some value to their relationship with Turkey, although that is framed because, you know, Turkey is now building other relationships, including with Russia. It is recently contracted to buy the S-400 missile defense system from Russia, with US and NATO don't like. So all that is fraying a bit, but they have that. Also, there are reports of a large number of Syrian refugees presently based in Turkey, and Turkey has sought to weaponize them against Europe. Because whenever they feel that their relations with European countries are difficult, they try and push those refugees into Europe, and that generates a political backlash within Europe, fanning anti-immigrant sentiment. And there was a time when European countries led by Germany gave some funds to Turkey to say that, okay, here's the money coming from us and hold the refugees within Turkey.
Right.
And then there is a stand-up also in the Mediterranean. So look, they need each other. It's a complex relationship. There was a time when Turkey wanted to become a member of the European Union. There was a dialogue process between the European Union and Turkey on potential membership. France had been opposed to that, but that has not. But clearly all that will now fall by the wayside. But I think because of all these factors, the economic linkages, the refugee issue, NATO membership, there is a certain mutual interdependence. But European countries, for their own reasons, the values they stand for, democracy, freedom of expression, the European solidarity, will clearly stand with France. But as I mentioned, Turkey is making a separate play for consolidation of power by Erdogan and leadership of the Muslim world, and they'll be looking at that dimension. So I think each will lose a bit, each will gain a bit.
Right. So one final question. Within the Muslim world, you know, there is a divide as well, and Uyghur rights activists recently brought up an issue that Chinese state television also in a state-sponsored broadcaster portrayed or depicted a portrait of Prophet Muhammad, and the Uyghur rights activist says that this is China-sanctioned depiction of the Prophet, which is not allowed in Islam. But we haven't heard any outrage from Erdogan or Imran Khan against China, or neither there have been any calls by Erdogan or Imran Khan for boycott of Chinese products. That Uyghur rights activist alleges that this is selective outrage directed by Erdogan and Imran Khan against France, because France is simply a soft target.
Well, this clearly reflects the double standards that are there. And in fact, you may recall that in several press interviews, Imran Khan has been repeatedly asked that why aren't you critical of what China is doing against Muslims in Xinjiang? The Uyghurs who are being put in concentration camps, forced labor, forced sterilization in some cases, huge human rights violations. And he said that I don't have enough information on that, which is just a way of deflecting the issue. At the same time, there were a couple of months ago, about 30 members in the UN Human Rights Council came out with a statement against Chinese practices in Xinjiang. But China was able to mobilize 50 countries to come out with a position in support of what China was doing. And many of them were Muslim countries. And so clearly in many of these things, it's not just the principles and facts, but politics that determines the positions that people take. And many of the countries were guided by their trade, investment and other linkages that they have with China in determining their position rather than the facts of the issue. So here, I think because they have a certain dependence on China, particularly in the case of Pakistan, and Erdogan's politics is more directed against Europe and the West and his rivals within the Muslim world, that they have kept the attention away from China and are trying to focus it more in terms of their rivals in the Muslim world as well as the European countries.
Ambassador Arun Singh, thank you so much for joining us on WION and giving us your insights on this standoff between Erdogan and French President Emmanuel Macron.